Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. We are thrilled to have Louise Penny with her new book in the Chief Inspector Armand Gamache book. It's called A Great Reckoning. Well, Louise, welcome back to Naperville and Anderson. It is so exciting to have you here on launch day.
I think this is like my 200th time here, isn't it?
No.
I think it's actually my third, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is your third.
Well,
yeah.
I'm thrilled.
We need to make it more.
Do you know, I think this is actually the second launch day. I think I had another launch a few years ago.
Probably. But I want to tell you what an honor it is to have you here on the day A Great Reckoning is out in the world.
Thank you. I know, it takes a year. It takes me actually slightly more than a year to write every book. So when it goes public, it's a very moving time for me. Very frightening time, actually.
I mean, this is your 12th book, but this is the 11th book in the series. So how does it feel, even with the 11th? Is it still, it's so exciting and thrilling? Is there a little bit of trepidation knowing that it's now, out in the world and people, your readers and fans are able to get their hands on the book?
I think part of the problem is that I have a really active imagination, which is a good thing on the one hand, but on the other hand, I dream really big, so it's thinking, well, it's going to be huge, or the opposite. Oh, no one's going to buy it, they're going to hate it, it's going to be awful. If I'm not careful, I can live kind of on the fringes of reality rather than right in the center. So I try to just enjoy the reality of it. It's exciting, but it is scary because you don't really know how people are going to take it. And I take people's comments. I wish I didn't. I wish I cared less what people thought. But I do care, and so I take it to heart. I take the good things to heart, but I also take the negative.
Right. And this book has gotten 4-star reviews, and which is so wonderful. So PW and Library Journal and Booklist, but then it got the mother of all starred reviews at Kirkus Reviews, starred review. How fabulous that is.
Amazing. That is amazing when Kirkus, when all of them come through. I have to say, you get that Kirkus, oh my God, that's amazing. And then you get the other, and then you want the fourth, right?
Oh yeah.
Let's do it.
You got the quadruplet. It's really wonderful.
And that helps a day like today. So that I go into it, and I have to remember. I was on the plane today, thinking, just surrender to reality and realize. First of all, a couple of things. I've done my best. The publishers have done their best. My wonderful editor has done her best. And now it's up to the gods. It's out of my control, but all the augurs are good.
Well, I think they look very promising, so no worries.
Thank you.
So, with our Chief Inspector here, Gamache, it's Gamache, right?
Yes.
Am I saying that? I always want to make sure I say that right. In A Great Reckoning, and we don't want to give away too many spoilers, but where did the seeds for the story start with these cadets that he's working with? And he's trying to teach them about police corruption, but doing it in sort of an interesting way. So where did the seeds for this 11th book start?
Well, there are a number of sort of acorns that had to come to fruition that you see actually through the books. If you reread the series, you'll see some of them beginning to take root. One is that a sort of a leitmotif through the whole series is that Gamache is not your average cop. He doesn't like guns, he tries not to wear one, he certainly doesn't want to use one, he doesn't encourage it, he doesn't encourage that kind of almost brutality, the callousness that is seen in some forces and certainly in some fiction. He's described, if you see him in a room, you'd never think there's a police officer. He'd be more likely to be mistaken for a university professor. And so that got me thinking, and at the end of the last book, The Nature of the Beast, well, actually all the way through The Nature of the Beast, one of the choruses was, what next? What next for Gamache? Because he was retired. But he was only in his 50s. He was still a vital man. He had a lot to contribute. So what next? And there are a whole lot of things open to him. And this came up because I'm essentially the same age as him, and I have a lot of friends who are the same age who are taking early retirement or in the position to, and asking themselves that, what next? What is it I really want to do? And that's not as easy a question to answer as one might think, because we have a lifetime of expectations of what other people want us to do, what we feel we should be doing, approval, where we want the approval of others. All of that has been piled on us for 55 years. And to strip that away and say, you know what, I want to work in a secondhand junk shop. You know, Mom may not approve, whoever might not approve, but that's what I really want to do. So Gamache had to get to the heart of what does he really want to do, and in this book we discover what he really wants to do.
Right. So the title, and considering whose birthday it is this year, right? So tell us where the title comes from.
It comes from Shakespeare's As You Like It, and the actual quote is, it would strike a man more dead than a great reckoning in a little room.
Right.
And I loved the first part, the fact that it brings in the issue of death. It's also a veiled reference to the murder of Christopher Marlowe, which is interesting because, of course, the whole mystery about Marlowe's death and who was behind it and was there a plot and all the conspiracy theories was Marlowe one of the authors of some of the Shakespeare plays. But I also love, the books are about many things, as you know, and probably least among them is murder, although they are clearly crime novels. One of the things they're about is duality, of the juxtaposition, of the beautiful, intentionally idyllic setting of Three Pines, the almost mystical quality about it, and the horrific arrival of a cruel act, the shattering event of murder, and that juxtaposition, the gap between the social veneer and what we're really thinking, the gap between what we say and how we're feeling.
Right. But it's also, and that's what I find fascinating about your stories, it's that gray area, because nothing is all one thing.
No, exactly.
You know, nothing is all good, nothing is all bad. It's that gray area, but it's those two sides.
Exactly, and I think in this book too, I quote Auden, which is, and one of the quotes was that I love is that evil is unspectacular and always human.
Right, right.
And that we are introduced to goodness every day, even in drawing rooms among a crowd of faults. And that's also that juxtaposition of the banality of evil, but the banality of goodness as well, and how difficult it is sometimes to recognize either of them.
Yeah. You know, you talk about the idyllic nature of Three Pines and how this small village is really a character in its own self. You know, it's a character in a place, but it's also the characters within this village. And I think you're placing it in the eastern townships up in Quebec. And it is a character, but I want to know, creating this place and building this world, but what basic ingredients did you put in from your own town where you live and that area? And did you draw a lot from that area up there to make this place?
Yeah. We just had the pre-launch party, which is an annual event that we have in the village that I live in, which is Knowlton, Quebec. And our little independent bookstore, Brome Lake Books, with Danny and Lucy organized it. And this year we did a huge event under a tent, and it was a lot of fun. But the publishers came up from New York. And then we had a more intimate dinner afterward. And one of them turned to me and he said, "You know, I always thought you were making it up, but now I see that you're just transcribing what you see every day." It's not. It's a nonfiction book, is what I'm writing, and I throw in a fictional murder. I have no creativity at all. I just write what I see, and I am inspired every day by what I see. And Three Pines doesn't exist as a location. If you came to Knowlton, you wouldn't say, "Oh my God, this is Three Pines." It's not. Right. Three Pines really is a state of mind more than anything. That's what I think of it as. I think of Three Pines as the place where I am when I choose to be kind, rather than choose the easy, cruel, or sarcastic remark. Where I decide to be nice to someone when I don't choose to be cruel or nasty or clever. Then I am in Three Pines.
Right.
And so it's a place I take with me all the time, and often don't. I often leave it. I can be cruel and sarcastic and cutting, but it doesn't feel good.
Right.
I know that I'm on the outside.
Yeah. So the setting you've created is also a mindset.
It is.
Yeah. So
that's,
yeah.
and I
Right.
think that's the appeal, is that I think we all, I know that goodness exists,
Yeah.
and clearly you do too. And so many people want that validated in their lives because there's so much evidence of the opposite, that I think we yearn for a few things. I know I do, and I know that I am no different from anyone else. I spent a lifetime, or much of my life, thinking I was different, which was code for special. And it came as kind of a shock and a great relief to realize that I'm not different than anyone else. If I like a song, most people like it. I like the clothes most people like. I like the food most people like. And if I yearn for community and a sense of belonging, there's a pretty good chance other people are yearning for that too.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's also what the books are about. And that's what they provide. And they provide it not because it's a marketing tool, they provide it because it's so deeply ingrained in me,
Right.
that desire to belong. And I spent a lifetime looking for home. And I found it in the eastern townships of Quebec.
Right. But I think too, through your writing as an author, when you think of those places to belong, books can create those, create
Yes.
those communities, and
Yep.
not to, but just author, whether it's reader or whether it's bookseller. you
Yes.
know. We create those places that people feel like they can converse and
Yes.
look at each other face to face.
Yeah, and that they are not going to be judged, that they
Right.
will be listened to, that they will be respected, not necessarily agreed with, but that they are safe, that there can be a free exchange of ideas without being ostracized.
Yeah, yeah. So without spoilers, there was one character I really loved in the book because she was, like you said, that duality, and that was Amelia Choquet, or how do you pronounce it?
Choquet.
Choquet. But not your typical police cadet. Let's put it that. She's a freshman. So tell us a little bit about her and her DNA. Maybe we can't do that without spoilers.
No, we can.
Okay.
I'm just trying to decide whether to tell you the truth or not.
That's okay. Aha.
All right,
A true fiction writer.
No,
Okay.
all right, I will. And this isn't necessarily a secret. It's not something I talk a lot about.
Okay.
But I'm an alcoholic in recovery. 22 years now in a fellowship. And as part of the fellowship, there is a hope that in giving back, which is part of keeping the sobriety, is that it's something that is meant to be given away, given to others.
Right.
You sponsor people.
Yeah.
And I had a young sponsee who was not simply addicted to alcohol, but duly addicted to heroin. And smart, but oh so broken. And I adored her, and we got, it's a very intimate relationship we developed.
Sure. Wow.
And so Amelia is kind of inspired by this young woman, but not based on her in any way,
right.
but certainly inspired by that again, that on the outside, this is what I also learned in the fellowship that I try to bring to the books, is that, it is such folly to judge people based on how they look.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Right. You know, wondering about all the police procedures and what Armand goes through in being Chief Inspector. Did you have done much research through the series of the books, learning about that sort of thing? And has there been any research for any of the books that was really surprising to you that you found out about that?
I have done almost no research for the cops.
Okay.
Because I didn't
amazing.
want to know the truth.
Okay.
Then I would feel somewhat
All right.
restricted.
Sure. Yeah.
I needed to create a Surete du Quebec that suited my needs.
Okay.
So I created a structure, I created what would work for me.
Yeah.
At one stage, I went on a tour, and there was, in a community, they decided that the chief of police should interview me. And I thought, now we're in trouble, because he's going to say, it's all like this. And all fair comment, all absolutely true. But I thought, this is not going to be a lot of fun for me. He was so kind, because what he understood that this is not a documentary. It really is not nonfiction. But what he said that was very meaningful to me was that I got very close to what it felt like to be in charge of a lot of people, and to send them into harm's way, and at times to see them hurt and killed, and what it feels like to sit in your office. So that meant that's. I write about art. I don't know a lot about art, but what I write about is how art touches people. What I do know something about is emotions.
Emotion that fills in those gaps that strict fact can't do.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I have to be fairly rational, but I am by nature more intuitive.
Yeah. And that's one of the things about being intuitive and filling in those emotions. You're so good with relationships and how people react with it, but describing a person and getting inside their head, but also how they relate to others. And that's such a big part of your story, and when you create these books. And so I want to know, how essential is character to you when you write? And it's all the characters that we love from this series, but why is that the best fodder for great story for you?
It's just so rich. I live with a book for a whole year or more. I start thinking about a book about 4 months before I'm finished another one, and about 6 months before I start writing, and then it takes me a year of actual writing. So to write about a murder, that is simply an act. It's not a theme. It's not a philosophy. It's not an ethic. It's not an ethos. It would not sustain my interest for a year. But people do. People are endlessly fascinating.
Sure.
So that's why, for me, characters are really interesting. I mean, I go back to books and series because I like the characters, not because I thought that particular plot line was interesting, therefore this one will be. It's because I care about these characters and like their company. It's also, every decision I made when I was creating this series, when I was writing the first book, was selfish. Partly because I realized at that time that if I like something, other people probably will. But mostly because I thought it probably won't be published. So the writing of it has to be reward enough. So I have to love the company of these characters. And so I created characters whose company I would enjoy. And here I am, 12 years out, 12 books out. And I've barely scratched the surface of who these characters are.
And readers cannot, they love hearing about this. Like they're friends too.
I love that. I love that. That can be a bit of a double-edged sword though too, because there is a sense of ownership then. So when something bad happens to one of them, it's like I've stabbed them. And I hear about it.
I'm sure you do. So, I always refer to your books when I talk to somebody and they want a good mystery or something like that. I always refer to your books as sort of that thinking person's sort of mystery, and knowing that this is, it's not just figuring out the who did it and what and the whole thing, but it also makes you think from your heart and your soul. And then you always leave those topics that make you. Well, no, but I don't want to read a book that doesn't make me think about it long after I turn that last page. And that's exactly what these books do, because you put so much into it. And I think that does come from the characters. That these are real people. I mean, literally, when you think about it, people really think they're real, and we're reacting to them because of that difference between that duality of we all are.
Yes, but I also hope too that they aren't caricatures. They are people we recognize from our own lives, either from ourselves or from, not necessarily we know a Ruth, but we know someone who is Ruth-like, and then someone who has Clara-like qualities. And thank you for saying that. I often think that if someone reads my books simply with their brain, they're missing at least half of the book. That the books almost have to be absorbed through the chest first, and then up to the head. It has to involve both.
Right.
But I really, because I write from the chest. That's where it comes from. But as I said, that's where the first draft comes from, is from here and from here. And then the brain engages for the second and third and fourth drafts, and the structure and other plot issues that have to make sense, of course.
Well, isn't that any really good fiction is it involves your whole body?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the books.
Yeah.
Oh, the books that you can hardly wait to get home to read.
Exactly.
That's right. And you don't want
Right.
to eat. You don't want to sleep. You don't want to think about
And you
it.
slow down as you get to the
right.
end. Yes, because you have to make it last. Yeah. So I want to know the character of Armand Gamache. Where did he come from? And is he based on anyone, or a little piece here and there of anything, or was he totally, a novel invention for you?
Well, sadly, like everything else in the book, is essentially stolen from everything around me. I'm like a bit of a Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, taking bits and pieces. He is absolutely inspired by a whole lot of kind of father figures growing up. Walter Cronkite, Ben Cartwright. Some of those, the father figures with integrity, the ones you could trust, you knew would look you in the eye and tell you, and stand up for what they believed in, no matter what the cost.
Yeah.
I've admired that, obviously, and most people do, of course.
Yeah.
And they're not bullies, but natural leaders. There are a couple of Canadian. There's a fellow named Romeo Dallaire who's was a general in the Canadian Army, who was sent into Mogadishu with the peacekeepers to lead the peacekeepers, and was told not to stop the genocide. And he wrote a book called Dancing with the Devil about how devastating it was as a person of integrity and as a peacekeeper to stand back and see women and children macheted to death and looking at him saying, "Save me," and him just standing there and not with a gun.
Yeah.
He could have, but he was ordered not to. And he said he's never forgiven himself.
Yeah.
And he had the courage to admit that. A great leader and a wonderful man. But ultimately, he was really inspired by Michael, my husband, who was the head of hematology for the Montreal Children's Hospital and a professor of medicine at McGill. And he had the worst job anyone could imagine. He worked with children with cancer.
Right, sure.
Yeah. But just a lovely man.
Yeah. So food and poetry is always a big part, which I love the way you describe food in this series. And it's like literally you're drooling on the page when you describe it, because food really is an important part, and it's an important part whether you're a French culture or whatever, but food is so important.
It is.
And I love the way you describe it, but I love, like the poetry that you put in here and there in the different books.
Thank you. And again, it's sustenance for the body and for the soul, and kind of the Greek, the body, mind, and spirit. The food is, for me, is interesting. I'm not a cook. As you can see, I quite like to eat, and Quebec is a great place if you like to eat. Again, when I was doing Still Life, and I thought if it was ever published, what I would love is for people to experience a year in Quebec. So I've wanted the first 4 books to each be set in a different season, which they are. And I thought one of the ways, I wanted the books to be sensuous. So I wanted to engage all the senses. I wanted people to smell the wood smoke and to feel the cold and to taste the food. And a meal is not only the table, a great symbol of community and of sustenance, and enriching people. But it's also a great way to have the reader, to bring down the fourth wall, to have the reader feel as though you're sitting at the table, not a voyeur, not watching them eat, but actually eating along with them.
Yeah, and that's why we drool.
That's and then you'll buy another book.
That's right. That's right.
Part of the plan.
That's right. So I know you have a background. 18 years you were a journalist and on the radio for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and you were all over Canada, from Winnipeg to up to we're way
Thunder
north on
Bay.
Lake
Yeah.
Superior,
Yeah,
and
good for you.
yeah, and then Toronto,
You've done
Montreal.
research.
No, but I thought I'd love to hear this kind of stuff, being a journalist and then being on different programs, and finally being in Montreal was your last gig, doing a morning show. So being
Actually, it was in a
was
noon
it-
show.
A noon show.
It was. I did the morning show in Quebec City.
Oh, Quebec City.
Right, and
Yeah,
then the
which is
noon
such
show.
a great place.
It is.
But all that experience being a journalist and being on the radio and interviewing people and all that, how has that informed your novel writing and being a life of a writer?
In a whole lot of ways. I think a good writer is a good listener, and a good journalist is a good listener, like you are. Chances are the loudest person in a room isn't the writer. They're the ones listening to the loudest
Right.
person in the room and making notes.
Sure.
And that's a skill that you learn as a journalist as well. And I got to listen to people for 18 years, and often people in extreme circumstances. You don't end up on the news. You didn't end up on my show because absolutely nothing was happening in your life. Something extraordinary had happened. Either something very good or something very bad. So I got to see how people react in extremis.
Right.
And so that was very helpful. I got to see the terrible sides of human nature.
Sure.
But I also got to see acts of forgiveness that were humbling. That people forgiving things that I couldn't even begin to fathom forgiving.
Right.
And those are the ones that stay with me more than
Oh, I bet.
the really nasty parts. But the other thing it taught me was discipline.
Yeah.
That's really the key. You must meet a lot of emerging writers with all sorts of half-finished books. And I think the difference between those who finish and those who don't isn't necessarily talent, it's discipline.
Your website, I want to tell you, it's fabulous, because what your website has that the vast majority of authors' websites do not have is that monthly letter that you write, and how open you are, and how candid you are, and how altruistic you are in what you write, not only to your readers, but I think you're writing for yourself in some ways, and reporting that, and being so honest about the experiences you had, like you just mentioned before, but also about your husband and his diagnosis with dementia, and all the stuff that you say, but all the joy you put into those letters, which I find not the norm. It's the exception to what authors put out there about themselves. Do you enjoy writing those letters every month?
I do. They're often difficult, and I write and I rewrite them. Sometimes I wonder if I share too much, and particularly with Michael, I try to. It's important to me to keep his dignity, but so often we hide behind dignity as an excuse not to talk about unpleasant things like dementia.
Right.
So yeah, I do. I like the response. I get a lot of emails back from people who say, my husband's just been diagnosed, or my mother died of it, or and sometimes not dementia, sometimes it's cancer or whatever. It's losing someone you love more than you love yourself.
Right.
And walking that path and feeling not alone. I don't feel alone when I write those letters and get the letters back. I don't feel alone because I know that there are others who have been down the road ahead of me and have survived, and those who are coming up behind me.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
No. I just not seen that before with other authors, and and that quite that way. So.
I can't imagine. I mean, right now I'm on book tour, so I'm doing a lot on Facebook and on the upcoming newsletter.
Sure.
It's all about the book because
Yeah.
that's what my life is.
Yeah. Right.
But it wouldn't interest me if I subscribed to someone's newsletter, whoever it was.
Right.
Whether it's Hillary Clinton's or yours or another author's, who said, vote for me or buy my book or come to my bookstore over and over again.
Right.
No, you want to get to know them a little bit.
Yeah. But I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me, and congratulations on Book 11,
Thank
A
you.
Great Reckoning, and thank you for coming to see us on launch day.
I'm thrilled. I couldn't imagine a better place than Anderson's.
What a great conversation with one of our absolute favorite authors on the launch day of her new book in the Inspector Gamache series. It's A Great Reckoning by Louise Penny. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.